Forget everything you think you know about Bone Spirit. This new build is incredibly easy to play, it's easy to assemble, and it does ridiculous amounts of damage very quickly. This is actually a very decent speed farming build due to its ability to proc the teleport rune word, and it's also able to ramp extremely quickly thanks to not running Grasping Veins, not running a lot of the things that used to make this build feel extremely clunky. This build is extremely fast, it's very mobile, and it obliterates everything in the game. I'm doing 3-minute 75s, 3-minute 80s, and I'm able to do about 3.5-minute 85s, sometimes 4-minute 85s, and I'm able to clear up to a pit 101. The current highest pit clear for Bone Spirit is 105, which makes it the second highest Necromancer build, and this build is just destroying everything. In terms of raw damage, this is the highest DPS build Necromancer has access to, and let's talk about how this build works. So how did this build go from being a clunky nightmare to an extremely consistent, easy to play, fast-paced, smooth build? Well, it was thanks to a new tech discovery from Sirach. But before we can talk about it, we first have to talk a little bit about how the main engine of Bone Spirit works. So if you aren't familiar, Bone Spirit fully functions around the Banished Lord's Talisman, and the goal is to spend 275 resource every single time you cast Bone Spirit, because remember, it drains all of your resource whenever you cast it. And we're able to proc this overpower every single cast. So we're able to get access to all the overpower multipliers and all the crit multipliers. And that's how you're able to see these ginormous hits where I'm hitting for like 17 billion. I think the current highest hit for Bone Spirit is closer to 30 billion, but that is with this build. So how is that possible? How are we able to generate 275 essence with every single cast? Well, that's where the new tech comes in. Chance to restore resource on your weapon. This actually generates a ridiculous amount of resource, and it procs the lucky hit like crazy when paired with the Shattered Spirit aspect. This was a tech discovered by Sirach, and it makes the build so smooth and so fast. So basically, every single time we cast Bone Spirit, we're going to spawn 18 Bone Splinters. Those Bone Splinters use the base lucky hit chance of Bone Splinter, but because there's 18 of them, we're able to easily proc lucky hit with every single cast. Any lucky hit proc is extremely consistent. That includes like Decrepify for cooldown reduction, and that includes Fist of Fate for crowd control. And the other great thing about Fist of Fate is they also have this massive lucky hit chance on them. And so when everything is coming together, every single cast of Bone Spirit is spawning tons of shards. The shards are proccing the crap out of lucky hit, and every single lucky hit is generating resource. And that's how we're able to do so much damage so quickly. We're able to instantly refill our barn no matter what our essence pool is. And the build is so easy to assemble because we can get maximum essence now from trade ghouls. You're no longer fully reliant on rolls on gear, so you're able to easily get to 275 essence, and once you get there, you just need this roll on your main hand and offhand to restore resource, and you're gonna be absolutely blasting. Now, Harlequin Crest is amazing in this build due to it having maximum resource, a ton of life, and this life is gonna get buffed, by the way. The maximum hit for this build is gonna go even higher, but Harlequin is a fantastic item. That being said, you can play this without a Harlequin. The build will still function just fine. You just need a maximum resource and a cooldown reduction helmet, and the build will still function. Now, keep in mind, this variant I'm showing you right now is my speed farming variant that allows you to obliterate content crazy fast. But for the push variant, there's going to be a few changes, and those changes will be linked in the build description below. But let's talk about the speed farm variant, and this build is crazy good for farming. And remember, when I'm talking speed farming, I'm talking 80, 85s, right? Which is some of the highest content that any build in the entire game can speed farm outside of Spiritborn, which is obviously ridiculously broken. But let's look at this. So we are running Pak Jaw. So Pak is a rune word that gives you one offering for every 1% of your resource you spend. Every single cast of Bone Spirit is spending 100% of a resource. So we're getting 100 offering per cast, and we only need to cast 4 times to get access to the teleport. And you can see from the gameplay how often I'm able to teleport. I only have to cast 4 Bone Spirits, and I'm able to rock and roll. For my other rune word, I am playing Bak Kua, which is whenever I move, I gain movement speed. This allows me to get much closer to the movement speed cap for speed farming, right? So my character is running crazy fast, and I'm able to teleport every few seconds, and you can start to see all of the different pieces of the build coming together. We have like the 275 essence to proc the Banished Lords. We have the essence generation from the lucky hit chance plus the Shattered Spirit. We have the crazy mobility from the Jaw rune and from the movement speed rune. We've got the Harlequin for damage reduction and cooldown reduction. we're rocking the Curse Aura to auto-apply curses, and everything is coming together for this build that can just clear crazy fast while dealing loads of damage. Another thing that's making Bone Spirit so powerful is all of these extra ranks of Bone Spirit we're able to get from gear. On our chest piece, we're able to get up to +6 to Macabre skills, which is pretty crazy. On our boots, we can also get +6 to Bone skills, which is also pretty crazy. We've got the Harlequin for +4, Banished Lords goes up to +6, and the Ring of Starless Skies, I believe, goes up to 6 as well. It's either 5 or 6, I don't remember exactly. But all of that combined gets you well into the 30s for Bone Spirit ranks, which is pretty insane. Now you can see that the gear I'm showing you in this video is not nearly perfect. It is pretty good though, but it's not perfect, and yet I'm still able to do these ridiculous numbers. Now we also need to talk a little bit more about Fist of Fate. This is an odd item that has never been played in a Necromancer build before, and we need to talk about why it's being played and what makes it good. So, for starters, it has a pretty decent attack speed roll, which is great because this build scales extremely well with attack speed. It's got crit chance, which is also great because we kind of want that to cap out our crit chance. And finally, it has this huge lucky hit roll, and that's really what makes this item so good. This lucky hit chance is a way higher than what you can get on any other pair of gloves, and we need that crazy high lucky hit for proccing the chance to restore primary resource, which is what's going to allow our build to really function. This gloves are also going to have a chance to apply random CC to enemies for 2 seconds. Now, normally that's a pretty okay effect, but in a build that's hitting at, like, your enemies 19 times every single time it casts, this is going to allow you to instantly stagger any boss. It is pretty ridiculous how fast you stagger bosses with this item. Finally, the legendary effect, that roll range ends up being a 50% damage increase, because sometimes you do way less damage, sometimes you do way more damage, and it ends up being overall a 50% multiplier. So these gloves have a 50% multiplier, attack speed, crit chance, crazy lucky hit, and instant boss stagger. Fantastic item in this build. Now, one other interesting thing that this build is playing is Rapid Ossification on the ring. Rapid Ossification is going to allow you to reset the cooldown on Bone Spirit. Remember, Bone Spirit by default has a very long cooldown. I think the base cooldown is something like 14 seconds. We need to get the cooldown all the way down to 7 seconds so that we can use Enchanted Bone Spirit to reset it from 7 to 0. So you can see currently my base cooldown is 8.52, and with Rapid Ossification, every time I cast, I reduce the cooldown by 3.5 seconds. So currently I am easily over the cap, and what I like about going over the cap, by the way, is sometimes, you know, if you don't have your full essence bar and stuff, it'll still fully reset with my current setup, which I really like. So you can see you can instantly reset Bone Spirit with just one roll of Rapid Ossification on gear, and that's how we're able to get it to the point where it has 0 cooldown. So another important piece of this build is Soul Rift. In this build, we're not using Soul Rift for resource generation as much as we're just using it for pure damage and pure survivability. We're using it for that 30% damage buff and also for the crazy barrier generation that this skill has. Now, what's fantastic about Soul Rift in this build is that it is instantly being reset by Abhorrent Decrepify. So typically, you know, you have to roll Soul Restoration, you gotta roll a bunch of stats to make it work, but in this build, because of Abhorrent Decrepify and how easily we're able to proc Lucky Hit, you're actually able to reset Soul Rift no problem at all with no rolls on gear. This is a fantastic buff to the build that allows it to sustain this huge shield and massive damage buff. Now, the last board is pretty normal, but you have 2 options for what you can take, and I think it's interesting. So for starters, you can run Blood Begets Blood, which is the best choice for pushing, because we are running the you can run the Grasping Veins that spawns blood orbs, and then you pair it with Blood Begets Blood, and you're able to generate tons of blood orbs, and you're able to get this damage buff in AoE. However, for speed farming, you really don't want to cast Corpse Tendrils for like damage buffs and stuff, and you don't want to be reliant on picking up blood orbs for a damage multiplier. That's why in the speed farm version, I recommend you play Scent of Death, because you're going to be permanently having a 15% damage multi. Remember, that's 15% multi as long as you have corpses, and with just a couple of points into Hued Flesh, our corpse generation is absolutely ridiculous, and we're able to easily sustain the corpses to keep that buff up. And it ends up being a lot more reliable. It also ends up being better on bosses than the Corpse Tendrils. But in the push version, you're going to see, you know, Blood Begets Blood, and in the farming version, you're going to see Gravekeeper. But in the push version, you're going to see Blood Begets Blood, and in the farming version, you're going to see Scent of Death. So how do all of these various changes come together and affect the overall gameplay of the build? So the way you want to play this is whenever you run up to a pack, you want to pop Soul Rift, and then your curse will automatically decrepify everything. You cast 1 Bone Spirit, which will generate corpses. You cast Corpse Tendrils, and then you drop a Bone Cage around the Corpse Tendrils. Then you just hold down Bone Spirit and do billions of damage. And then, just make sure you keep up Soul Rift, keep up the Bone Prison, and then whenever you need to, cast Corpse Tendrils. Remember, Corpse Tendrils in this build doesn't proc anything, it's just for pulling mobs into a pile. Now, for bosses, we need to talk about a cute little tech that you can do. So, against bosses, what you want to do is you want to pop, because okay, so here, let me show you. So let's go down to 1 training dummy and watch what happens whenever I cast. So you're going to see my Bone Spirits, my shards, I'm only hitting the boss with a few of the shards. And you can see, I'm getting some good hits, getting some billion damage hits and stuff, but the DPS isn't as consistent as you would want it to be. So how do you fix this problem? Well, you need to go inside of the boss, with Blood Mist, it's very tricky to do, but you can, I don't know if you can actually do it on this dummy. Let me try one more time. Yeah, I don't think you can. So for a normal boss, the boss is significantly bigger, so you can actually Blood Mist inside of the boss, and it'll make it, and you can see in a lot of the bossing clips that I do this, with the Duriel kill and stuff, you can Blood Mist inside of the boss, and then every single cast of Bone Spirit, all of the splinters will hit the boss, and you'll instantly fill your bar every single cast, and that's how you're going to be able to do consistent billion damage. But you can see in a lot of the boss kills that I don't do this. I just kind of walk up to the boss and just stand in front of it and hit it, which is totally fine. But keep in mind, if you do want to do peak boss damage, that's how you have to do it. Overall, this is a fantastic build that deals billions of damage crazy consistently and can obliterate any content in the game. This might not be the best build for Horde, but for any other content, this build wrecks. Even Nightmare Dungeons and everything, this new Bone Spirit build absolutely destroys. It's a great speed farm build, it's a great build for pushing, and I definitely recommend you try this build out if you want to hit for some big billions. But anyway, that's going to do it for today's video. Hopefully Spiritborn gets nerfed soon, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out, everybody.